In this new unit, we're looking at death and the afterlife. We are going to start out with the Great Pyramids at Giza. These, I'm sure you've learned about in elementary school, in middle school. You know, it's something that young kids learn about, and that's because they are so remarkable. They are massive, first of all, and then they are just astonishing in the fact that they were built so perfectly, and we're talking about 2500 BCE, so 4,000 years ago. These were constructed without modern machinery, much like Stonehenge that we just talked about last week. It's just massive. So these were used as tombs for the pharaohs and sometimes the queens as well. Of course, theirs are much smaller.
Right. Figures.
But inside would be everything that the pharaoh would possibly need in their afterlife, as they believed that you could take all of your earthly possessions with you into the afterlife.
I mean, this is a belief that permeates everything about ancient Egyptian culture. I mean, the way that you lived your life was really important because they believed you're going to take a lot of that stuff with you when you died.
And they were built in such a way that they were supposed to keep the living out, because once the pharaoh was in there, once all their belongings were in there, they were supposed to keep people out. Now, eventually, they were all plundered and all these things were stolen out of it. You know, King Tut, the reason we know about him so well is because his tomb was actually left intact until the 20s. And so
his stuff was still there.
Right. His is one of the very few that we're able to see what exactly the mummy looked like, what exactly all these different rooms with all these different belongings would have looked like had all these other ones not been robbed and over the year.
When these were first constructed, there would have been this sort of outer shell almost of polished pure white limestone. And it was polished to be shiny. So you can imagine if you were like walking around and you could see these out on the horizon, they would have been literally gleaming in the sun.
Right. They would have been reflecting that bright sun in the middle of the desert. There's no trees or hills around. We're talking about the middle of the desert. So you would have had these three massive pyramids just sticking out of the middle of the earth. They would have been, like she said, bright white, shiny. Over time, even the outside, the exterior has been stolen. People stole the limestone, but you've also had weathering over the past 4,000 years that has even done some deterioration. And so that's why now, of course, they look this sandy color and darker and rougher. A lot of people believe that slaves built these, but they actually believe now that they were highly skilled workers that were paid, probably not well, but they were paid and fed and all of those things that helped to build these pyramids. But, you know, you might be thinking, well, why are we talking about this in art? This isn't history class. The pyramids themselves are a work of architecture, but the things inside, the walls were painted with stories from the pharaoh's life in detail, and the different art and artifacts inside are also important to art historians as well.
Right. And I mean, the ancient Egyptian art style is one that remained pretty much unchanged for thousands of years. They didn't change anything about the way they painted people or the colors they used. Anything. It stayed exactly the same, which is really unusual in the history of art in general. And you could go visit these today, and I know that there's a McDonald's right across the street now, so for added convenience.